When you're leasing a space, you're effectively flushing money down the toilet every single month. So I got to be cautious when I say that, and I'll tell you why. But number one, don't be scared of owning real estate. Real estate is one of the best means to wealth and retirement that you could, and it's so easy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao. Hope everybody's having a great start to their new year. This is the second episode of 2025. I want to remind everybody to thank our sponsors, both Dental Intelligence and the Doc Sites, for their support. And I also want to remind everybody about my event coming back to Florida in September 2025. It's September 26th and 27th at the Pier 66 Resort in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're just going to be announcing the speakers. There's some amazing speakers we have. Tickets should be on sale very soon if it isn't already. So check out superchargerdentalpractice.com to check out the event and its amazing speakers. Today's episode is called Startup or Shut Up. My guest is Brian Mills from Roam Commercial Realty. Brian Mills is the owner of Roam Commercial Realty. With 25 years in the dental industry, he can understand the importance and impact real estate can have on your career. Roam specializes in tenant and buyer representation, specifically for healthcare providers. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Brian Mills. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
25 years? Are you kidding me?
Hey.
I mean, Botox must be a hell of a drug. Look at me, my forehead's not even moving.
Well, you have just as long in commercial real estate as I have in the dental space. So I started practicing in 1999, so it's 25 years. I retired in 2022, so I stopped in 23 years. I stopped, but that's how long I was doing dentistry for, right around the same time. So, Brian, why don't you start off by kind of introducing yourself to my audience, letting them know kind of what you do and how you help practices, and kind of what your role in the space is.
Yeah, well, Lynn, thanks for having me. I always feel underprepared because I don't have headphones, I don't have the proper background, but we've already done 5 outtakes so far, so nobody's perfect. Thanks again for having me. So I am the founder, owner of Roam Commercial Real Estate. I have been in the dental space for 25 years. I haven't always been in real estate, and neither has my team. And I think that's what makes us so good is we're so well-rounded. I mean, I started as a CEREC specialist 25 years ago when people had no idea how to spell it or pronounce it. And we just said, hey, just wait, it'll get better at some point. I've been in real estate for over the past decade. It's pretty easy what we do. We're a double niche real estate firm. So we do 2 things really well. Is number one, we do tenant buyer representation. So that simply means we're not a listing company. We don't work on behalf of landlords, sellers, owners, etc. So our fiduciary, which is a fancy word for legal, our fiduciary responsibility starts and stops with our clients who happen to be healthcare providers. 90% of our business is dental. That's what we know like the back of our hand. We've probably done, well over 500 dental startups and thousands of dental transactions throughout the year.
Got it. So let's talk about specific things. And I think the first question I want to ask you is, can you talk about the different types of people or representatives where you said you represent the kind of on the tenant side of things? Can you talk about, for someone understands, you have, obviously, if you're buying real estate, you have a real estate agent who is purchasing it for you. So can you just talk about the different levels of what type of representation is on someone who's buying a location or renting a location?
Yeah. So I would say, number one, our biggest competition is not another real estate firm. It's really the doctors not understanding the process themselves. So our biggest competitor is probably mindshare, and doctors not realizing that they have a team of experts that they can have armed on their side. And it's free. We can talk about that in more detail, but in all forms of real estate, especially in commercial, it has remained unchanged. So a tenant or a buyer of a commercial piece of property is always afforded free representation. You should never engage with a listing broker. The listing broker is somebody who simply has a sign on a building for sale or for a lease. that broker's responsibility is legally, contractually bound to the seller, to the landlord, etc. They may say things like, "Hey, I'm happy to help you. I can help you. Let me create, an LOI, an offer to purchase." But again, their legal responsibility, it's important to understand, lies solely with the seller or with the landlord. It's very important that you have your own team, meaning your own broker, your own attorney, your own advisors, etc., that are working on your behalf and your behalf only. So we represent tons of doctors in leasing spaces, lease renewals, which is a huge thing. That's over half of our business. And that's where a lot of doctors get taken advantage of as they go, 25, 30 years of their career in a space, and they've never taken the opportunity to reset the financial and legal terms of their lease. And then, they go to sell their practice and they realize that they're paying 40% over market and they don't have the right assignment language. So those are the really sad stories that we encounter every day. We help doctors buy buildings. We do some investment opportunities for existing clients. So anything that touches real estate, that's where our expertise come in. We do a lot of startup doctors, hence the name Startup or Shut Up. So it's funny, and you've probably seen it, Len, in your career and speaking all across the country, is dentistry is really like at two ends of the spectrum. You either have doctors who are super scared just to get off the fence and do a single startup or buy a practice, or you have doctors who have 10 to 50 locations, and there's not a whole lot in between. It's not often that you see a doctor who has 2-3 locations who doesn't have the aspiration of getting to 10 to 20 and wrapping it up with their big EBITDA and selling it to a large DSO corporation. So that's what is kind of peculiar about this business is there's not a whole lot of room between the haves and the have-nots. It's either you're struggling to get off the ground because you can't get out of your own way, or you have figured it out and you've got 20 locations and you're trying to do 3 to 5 every year before you get to that magic number.
No, I agree with you 100% there, and they're right. There is very few practices like 1 or 2 locations, 3 locations. You have the ones that are 10 and growing significantly, right, so they can resell and or sell it to a DSO and kind of sail off into the sunset. Yeah. So my audience is very much I don't have the DSO market listening to my podcast, but I have a lot of new owners or new people who want to be owners. Right. I'm curious. So let's start off with somebody makes a decision to start up a practice, which could be a scary proposition, even though there's a lot of factors that go involved, getting new patients, whether you buy or rent. So I want to start off with when someone is looking to start a practice, how do they decide whether they can afford to buy something? Because obviously there's a lot of equity there. Obviously, that's really important to have equity rather than paying rent all the time. Yeah. But how can someone determine whether it's the time to buy a building or rent a building right from the get-go?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you have to decide is practice ownership for me. And I, like you, I speak all across the country. And the first couple sentences I always say to the group is, I'm here to give you permission not to start your own practice. When we started 25 years ago, when you went to dental school, you probably, I'm assuming, went with the mindset like a lot of your colleagues and classmates that, hey, I'm going to dental school to start my own business. I'm not necessarily going to be a great employee for somebody. That's more of a physician mindset. So decades ago, most doctors started off on the path to dental school thinking, I want to have my own practice. Today, that mindset has kind of shifted. The millennial mindset really is, well, I'm kind of looking for this different, I guess maybe quality of life they're looking for. They want to clock in, clock out, and not have to think about the practice so much. So the first thing you have to do is you have to think about, is starting a business the right opportunity, the right career path for me? And I'm the first to raise my hand and say, it doesn't make you, less than or a lesser doctor if you don't start or open or buy your own practice. You've still achieved in the top 1 percentile of everybody in the U.S., if not the world. So nothing wrong with clocking in and clocking out to be a great associate or employee for somebody every day. But if you have this burning desire to do more, what do you think the success rate of a scratch dental startup is these days, Lynn?
99%.
99.6%. You're pretty damn close, man. 99.6%. So what is everyone so scared of? you're looking over the edge and, you want to bungee jump, but you're terrified that the bungee cord is going to break because of this great unknown. But if I tell you, you have a 1 in over 500,000% odds of dying in a bungee accident, you'd probably say, well, that seems pretty safe, but yet I still don't know if I make that leap, what's on the other side of it. So it's an almost 100% success rate. Buying a practice is actually number 2 when it comes to the numbers behind success rates on starting a practice or buying a practice. Number 2 in that it's like a 99.4% success rate. So either or is almost fail proof. The reason that practices don't make it, believe it or not, are usually poor personal decisions. It's number 1, drugs, and number 2, divorce. So, if you're not planning on having a mean cocaine habit or getting a nasty divorce anytime soon, the chances of you succeeding are really, really good. I would say most of our doctors come to us because they've had this desire, but something has driven them over the edge. They're so fed up with working in corporate or being underappreciated or not being able to practice that they want to practice that we sit down with them either in person or over a Zoom call, and it's almost like this big sigh, like, oh, I've just had enough and I can't do it anymore. Help me get out of my current circumstance. So I have no idea if that answered any of your questions, but it's not a matter of if you can afford it. It's a matter of personally if you can afford to continue doing what you're doing for the next 20 to 30 plus years. Because again, the success rate is almost fail proof. As long as you have DDS or DMD behind your name and you don't have $2 million in student debt, you're going to get a loan. You can afford it. The banks will keep you safe. They will cash flow it. The underwriting has limitations on it. And that's ultimately why doctors are so successful in the startup process, because the banks are going to control the business for the first 3 to 5 years. So it's not a matter of you can financially afford it. It's a matter of personally if you can keep continuing what you're doing.
And a lot of things, I think it is the fear. I think it's a fear of leaving something that you're comfortable with. If you're working as an associate, you have a steady stream of income. Generally, year 1, 2, and 3, you're probably going to make less money as an owner, but you have a lot more freedom as an owner. You have a lot more write-offs as an owner. You have a lot more decision making as an owner. So yes, I think it's you have to just either shit or get off the pot, as I like to say. And I hate to say that, but that's what it is a lot of times. Is what's holding you back? And you said it there. And I think a lot of times it's just fear of not knowing how you're going to get patients. I chose to buy a practice. I bought a practice in 2007 from a dentist who unfortunately committed suicide. So I had a building. I gutted the building. I bought the building. I renovated the building. I had a team. Thank God they stayed with me. And I had a pretty significant patient base. I think that was my fear when I bought the practice, was losing patients. I think when you start a practice, it's a fear of getting patients and marketing and spending the money. And a lot of people don't realize that when you buy a practice or even start up a practice, you don't use your own money. You use the bank's money, like you said. The bank's you don't have to take money out of savings to buy it. Probably for a building, if you want to buy the building, you have to use a down payment to buy the building. But that's all you have to be doing. Otherwise, there's no real hard cost involved from you taking that money out of your pocket to buy a building, buy a practice, or start a practice up. So I'm in a complete agreement with you on that.
There's a couple things I do to help, especially younger doctors, feel comfortable embarking on this journey. Is number 1, I say, could you throw a rock tomorrow and get a job at a corporate office? Absolutely. No, I have no problem with employment, especially as a specialist. You're pedo, ortho, endo, OMS. You can go get a high-paying job anywhere you want in the country. Most GPs in any decent market would say, yeah, I have no problem going and getting a job. It's just a matter of, do I want to work at that corporate gig or not? But I can easily be gainfully employed anywhere I go. Okay. Well, if you can do that, that tells you, number 1, the market's telling you there's a need for more dentists out there. Are the DSOs opening additional locations? I mean, even Pacific at 1,000 locations continue to open 60 to 75 new locations a year, right? So there's a massive need out there. It's just a matter of righting that ship and separating yourself from the corporate world. One thing that banks do a horrible job on is telling young doctors how this process works. The first time they typically hear it is from my team. And so doctors, they stall so long because they think, well, I'm going to have to save up a bunch of money, and I'm going to take a bath the first year, and I'm going to lose all my liquidity, and yada, yada, yada. All these things that are completely untrue. So when you start a practice, again, you talked about using the bank secured money. Most doctors in the first year end up taking home a raise over what they're doing in their associate. And the reason for that is the bank is very risk adverse. The B of A, the Wells Fargos, the Panaceas, the Provides of the world, they all have the same exact underwriting criteria. And the number one condition on a startup is you're not allowed to just quit your job cold turkey and go sit in a startup location 5 days a week and say, hey, we're here, where is everybody? The party started. They mandate that you continue to associate 2 to 3 days a week so that you have a steady stream of income while you're working 2 to 3 days a week in your practice. Then they inject what's called working capital. So they're going to give you somewhere between $60,000 to almost $100,000 in working capital. Hey, Dr. Smith, here's a check for $75,000. Park it in your bank account as a rainy day fund. So in combination with that steady stream of income, with you taking home almost double as an owner versus what you do as an associate, because most associates are making 20 to 25%. The gold standard in your own practice should be as close to 40% take home as possible. Plus you're getting paid on hygiene on top of that. By the time you wash all that out, you usually end up taking home more money as a first year startup practice than you do as a pure associate. So again, the bank has all kinds of rules and regulations that will keep you safe and make sure that you have a steady stream of income without touching any of your savings whatsoever.
Got it. Now let's talk about the effective ways to use real estate as a means of wealth, because obviously, as I mentioned, you have a choice when you start up. You can buy a building or you can rent a building.
Yeah.
Obviously, rental, you're paying money every month and you have no equity. If you can afford to purchase it, you're obviously gaining equity as another form of wealth. So can you talk about that, just how that is and how it relates to startup practices?
Man, we need like some sound effects, like like a toilet flushing in the background or something else. When you're leasing a space, you're effectively flushing money down the toilet every single month. So I've got to be cautious when I say that, and I'll tell you why. But number one, don't be scared of owning real estate. Real estate is one of the best means to wealth and retirement that you could, and it's so easy. All we're doing is looking at rent replacement. You're leasing a building for $6,000 a month. What does it cost you to own this building with standard tax deductions and write-offs? It's probably the same, if not less. Even if it's more, you have to think of owning your own building as a savings account. Every month you're paying yourself back. And at the end of a 20, 25-year career, now you own this asset free and clear. And what you do is now you sell the practice and you keep the real estate and you generate passive income in perpetuity. You can pass it on to your kids. You can wrap the whole thing up. You have a built-in buyer when you're ready to let that thing go. So it only makes sense to own your real estate. That is if it's not a detriment to the production of your practice. So the number one thing that you should be looking at is how much can I produce out of this location? We do have doctors that get so overly focused on owning to the detriment of their own production. So think about the business first and foremost. Yes, you will have an asset that appreciates over time. Yes, you'll have something that's worth something tangible in retirement, but you also don't want to be so laser focused that you're going to hurt your practice. If you can produce $500,000 more out of a lease location than you could out of owning, I mean, that's a big matzo ball hanging out there. So you put that into the market and say, hey, I have an extra $500,000 that I'm producing. I can put that in the market, or I could invest in my own commercial real estate on the side. Generally, it makes sense to own your real estate, but again, not to the detriment of your own practice. But there are some extreme tax incentives to owning your own building that shock people. I can show you a building for $2 million that cost you, on face value, $14,000 to own a month. But after you take in conservative tax deductions, now you're probably looking at less than half of that number. So you can get really, really aggressive, and any good CPA that knows anything about business and real estate can really help you just with basic conservative tax strategy to really carve that number down from what you would be paying to Uncle Sam at the end of the day. So owning is a great means to wealth and retirement. You can't own in every single market, and that's okay. We're out here in California. We do dozens and dozens of acquisitions every year. But around the country, it's obviously a little bit easier, and you have more opportunities to buy, whether it's a freestanding building, medical condo, ground up construction, which people always get sort of knock-kneed over. They get so fearful of ground up construction. If you have the time, you can build your own dream building from the ground up in a lot of parts of the country, even in California. You just have to know how that process works and give yourself ample time to do it.
Got it. Now that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, how is the market right now post-election compared to prior to the election? I know things change when you have an election coming up. So how has things been since that happened?
Yeah, we have been booming for a while, actually. I think everyone, if you try to time the market, you're always going to lose. The market is always going to be up and down. It's completely cyclical. It will come back. Commercial real estate is not like a housing boom. It stays very steady. The goal is just buy something. If you're in your own building right now, buy that damn building for whatever the number is. It doesn't matter if you're overpaying for it, because guess what? If you have to move out of your space and go buy another building, you're going to spend, I don't know, $500,000 to $1 million just in the build out alone. So this is not like a fix and flip where we're looking to get rich quick. You're talking about a long-term play over decades here. So it's okay to overpay for your space, especially if you're in there and it's got a built out infrastructure to it. It makes ample sense to do that. But trying to time the market is always a foolish proposition. You will always lose at the end of the day. Right now, we are continuing to see a boom in commercial spaces. Developers are going crazy in California all the way to the East Coast. Lynn, you probably see it in Florida. It never slows down. The market is just on fire. So don't think that, I'm going to wait 5 years and the market will drop down. Again, this is not like a housing boom that you can time up. You're always going to find yourself on the short end of the stick there. So it's about cash flow, right? Cash flow is king. You want to get in and make sure that you've got everything baked into a real estate loan and that you have the most manageable cash flow possible. And you can refinance these things. So people also get so wrapped up in interest rate. Well, I don't want to pay 7% interest rate. Well, you're talking about refinancing this thing really after probably 24 months of true payments after construction. So 24 payments and you're going to refi this thing and you'll be in a completely different position that you are in today. Get into the market and don't look back. And every doctor will tell you it's the best thing that they ever did was buying their own building.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about what type of leverage you have to negotiate. Can you talk about using leverage?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, lease renewals is something that we do a lot of. You cannot do a lease renewal on a doctor can do it successfully on their own. Most doctors aren't good at, they don't quite have the stones and the expertise to battle with their landlord. And it's good to have a little bit of a kind of an arm's length transaction there, so that you can bring in somebody else who knows how to use posture a little bit better. But a doctor let's say you're leasing a space and you started 10 years ago and you're coming up on a lease renewal. It's very, very important that you don't approach the landlord with the strategy that, hey, I'm a nice guy or girl and I pay my rent on time and can you give me a break? That's the basic rules in terms of being a tenant somewhere is you got to pay your bills on time, right? Otherwise you're in default. It doesn't matter. The landlord's going to say that's the basic rules of engagement here. I expect you to pay your bills on time. So if you approach the landlord with, hey, I'm a nice doctor, I'm stable, I'm going to be here a long term, they're going to say, great. That's going to get you a cup of coffee and another probably 3 to 10% rate increase. There's no leverage there. So you have to use what's called posture. What does posture mean? Posture is the reality of a perceived threat, meaning somebody's going to make a challenge to you, and the other side has to determine, well, what's the reality of that threat coming to actual fruition? And that's what the landlord has to feel from you, is that you are ready, willing, and able to vacate this spot and change your own outcome and your destiny. If they don't feel that from you, even though it's complete poker bluff most of the time, They've got to feel that from you. And if they don't, why would they do anything different? You know, they're in this to make money. And that's not to say landlords are bad. If you own your building, you own your house, Lynn, if you sold your house for $300,000 over what your neighbor sold it for, what would you do? You'd be bragging all over town. God, guess how much I sold my house for? You'd be so ecstatic. A landlord's in the same position. They're in this to make money, as much money as they possibly can. So you being stable, you paying your bills, that's great. That's the basic rules of engagement, and you're going to continue to get rate hike after rate hike after rate hike. So you need somebody who can come in and separate you from your landlord and know how to use posture effectively. And if you can do that, I just did 2 this week, and I think the average savings was on those 2 deals was $1,500 a month just in the rent, and the rent was already in a pretty good position. But $1,500 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but to a doctor who needs to buy a new piece of equipment, or could you imagine having a client say, okay, Lynn, I just came across $1,500 a month. Can you go put that into my digital ad spend? What you could do with that? How many new patients, 1 all on 4 comes through the door with that $1,500 a month? That can make a huge difference in your practice. Not to mention the other concessions that we try to target in terms of free rent, discounted rent, tenant improvement money to help you remodel the space, etc. The other thing that we're fighting for when it comes to lease renewals is, what is your legal language? Unfortunately, too many doctors just put their head down when they started or bought their practice and said, well, this is a legally binding document, so I'm just going to sign it as is. And that's the way that this works. And they find out when they go to sell their practice that their assignment language is shit, and they can't sell it to anybody. And now the landlord's really got you over a barrel. So the first time you do a renewal is a great time to either have us or your attorney go through and look at all the legal language if they didn't at the beginning, and make sure that you're set up to sell your practice and you can walk away free and clear, and that you don't have to stay on and guarantee that in perpetuity, as most leases would say.
Got it. So I'm curious, one of the other topics we wanted to bring up was why retail is a fallacy. Can you touch base on that a little bit?
Oh, I love this one. So, again, when we started decades ago, everybody really were targeting professional medical office buildings. It was taboo to be in retail, right? It wasn't until PDS really started in like the first retail location in Costa Mesa, California out here that people had even heard of retail medicine before. I mean, that was, talk about blow your mind. And so when I look back on those times, it's like, hey, that was just something that we never did. And again, it wasn't until really the DSOs started and then everybody followed suit and said, well, yeah, now we got to be in this super sexy retail location with a blinking sign and a billboard, and that's how we get all our patients in the door. Well, if you have a high-end practice, and your target is me or you, Lynn, you may lose all those opportunities. So people only think about, well, we get a lot of walk-by traffic, right? Okay, that's great. How many? And then I always challenge the doctors: how many patients don't come into your door because you're in a retail location? I can't really put a number on that. I have no idea how to quantify that. So you have to think about how many patients walk by your practice every single day, thinking that you're corporate because you're in a retail location, or thinking that, well, that seems kind of weird that I would go see my doctor in a retail location because I wouldn't take my kids to the pediatrician next to the Piggly Wiggly, or I wouldn't go see my dermatologist next to the Target, because it just doesn't seem to ring true in terms of quality. So I speak to a lot of big emerging groups and even DSO corporations around the country, and I hit them with a lot of studies. And so a lot of those groups are targeting a lower demographic or a middle income demographic, and they think that being in a retail location is better for them. Well, there was a survey done many years ago, and it talked about who's the number one consumer of social media these days. Well, it's middle income women, moms in particular. So who are making the deciding factors for the family? I know my wife is. So, is it better to pay double your rent in a retail location, or is it better to save that, 50%, that $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, and put it into a digital marketing strategy? I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you that thinking that you have to open up in a retail location is not the number one driver of production. Your marketing is, your brand is, your referral base is. So I guess the right answer is find the best business opportunity, and whether it's retail or if it's a professional office setting, just try to make sure that you're the first in that market and that you beat everybody else to it. And sometimes you can insulate yourself from competition that way, but please stop waiting to think that you've got to take the old bank building or be next to a Target or something else, because sometimes those can hurt you, especially if you're in a higher end demographic. I challenge you, you'll lose more patients in a higher end demographic being in a retail location than you'll ever get.
Got it. Now that makes a whole lot of sense. You sound like you're certainly an expert in this space. So before we transition to our lightning round Q&A, which I like to do at the end of these episodes, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch base on yet?
Yes. Do you love eggnog? Yes or no?
Do I love
Eggnog.
eggnog? No, I do not.
Oh, you just made Santa cry, man.
Bah humbug. I'm not an eggnog fan. So
I wore my Christmas shirt because it is the holiday season, and I got to tell you, I'm shocked at how many people have an adverse guttural response. They have like a visceral response to eggnog. I can't get enough of it. If I could walk into a bar and order eggnog in July, I would. I think it's called a pina colada, but I love eggnog, man. I really
that's
do.
good. That's good. Enjoy it because it's not for me.
I'll drink yours.
So we're going to switch here to a lightning round Q&A, Brian. I'm going to ask you 8 to 10 questions. Answer them as quickly as you can. We'll get through these pretty quickly here. So, do you have a favorite business podcast?
Oh, a favorite business podcast other than yours? Oh man, I'm gonna be really biased. I do like my buddy Greg Marinelli's at DesignWise. He does a really good one that talks about everything but business, and I know he was just on as well. There's another one out there off the top of my head, and I can't think of that, but I'll give a little plug to Greg. He does a really fun one that I've been a part of, and it's just you get a big chuckle out of it. So
got it. Yes, Greg was on my episode that released.
Yeah, Greg was on, and he has his own really good podcast. He's doing more on it, and I really like what he does.
All right. Who is the one person you love to have as a mentor?
That I would love to have or have had as a mentor?
Either or.
Man, I would say Dave Wilson was an early mentor of mine, and he's still a mentor of mine. And it's kind of easy for him because he's 6'7", and he just looked way down on me one time, and he said, "Brian, people don't like to be sold stuff. They like to make choices," and that always stuck with me.
Got it. How do you define success?
Having personal freedom to make the choices that are important to you and be free. I feel very I'm very grateful for my position in this life. I can choose to have a ponytail, as you'll see in my headshot, or shave all my hair off. I can wear skinny jeans. I don't have to wear a suit and tie to work, and for me, that's very free, and that's what I want for all my doctors out there is, hey, there's a different way. If you're somebody in here that you want to exude that, there's no greater way to exude your own personality than to have your own business, and I think that's one of the beautiful things of dentistry.
Got it. What is one skill or trait you feel is important to be successful?
Learning how to connect with people. And I know there's a lot of great clinicians out there who are introverted people. And somebody else told me years ago, they said, hey, when you go to your local dental convention or association, don't run and take clinical classes. Take some personal classes. How do you engage with patients chairside? Go take a Toastmasters class. I know that's hard for people who are not inherently people, but it's a skill set that if you can learn to get out of that uncomfortableness, it's something that's just irreplaceable, is being able to connect with people, especially in today's world.
Got it. What book should you go back and reread as it made a great impact on you the first time?
Oh, I hate books. I really do. I've read every self-help book out there. I've read every personal book, spiritual book, business book, and quite honestly, a lot of them are regurgitating the same thing over and over again. So I hate to slam on people who read books. I love history books and nonfiction and that kind of stuff, but everything else, it just seemed like there was a catch and a hook to it. And there was no substitute for having personal mentorship. And I'm glad you brought that up. Find a mentor, align yourself with your mentor. And the most important thing about mentorship is do not try to be a clone of that mentor. Make it your own.
Got it. And that's really good.
So don't read books, kids. You heard it from me.
What is the one thing you wanted to be when you grew up as a kid?
I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live.
All right. That's an interesting one. Do you keep a journal and does it help you?
I do not keep a journal because I have too much ADHD and it's like doing homework. So I hate all things that seem like work. That's probably why I was a horrible employee. I hate expense reports, all of that kind of stuff. I like to be out in person, mixing with people, hugging people, kissing babies. I do have to challenge myself though to get out of my own ADHD head and because there's a lot of valuable things in journaling and putting your thoughts on paper and being able to look back on it. But it's really hard for somebody whose brain is wired like mine to do that.
Got it. Describe Mondays for you in one word.
Mondays I dread because I have to sit down and I got to get my you know what together, and I've got to plan out my week, my quarter. I've got to do payroll. I've got to do all those things. So Mondays are a dread because it's my office day.
Okay. Which 3 adjectives describe your strengths?
Oh, tenacious, aggressive, and understanding, which is weird to say at the end of that. But I think to be a good negotiator and represent your clients, you have to have this sort of duality about you where you've got to be able to listen to fears and concerns of your clients, but then you've got to flip your hat around and now you got to go really kind of tap a landlord in the chest and play hardball. So you've got to have that split personality.
Got it. 2 last questions. How do you distinguish yourself from your competitors?
We fight really hard for every dollar as if it's our own. And that's what I'm most proud of is we don't make our clients sign contracts or anything else. Yeah, there's some legal stuff you have to do in terms of real estate. But at the end of the day, I tell everyone, I don't want you to feel like you're married to us because of a stupid piece of paper. I want you to feel like you're waking up every day and you have a team that's fighting hard for you. And you'll know from the first moment that you engage with somebody if this is somebody that you want to put all your trust and your stock into. So whether it's myself or my team, everybody's I think says the same thing is, boy, we can really feel that you guys are fighting hard. And when we come to the end of the deal, we fight a little bit harder just because. And that's what I'm most proud of is doing deals as if they were our own.
That's great. That's great. Last question. What is one subscription, either personal or business, that you cannot live without? One subscription.
Oh, my Nespresso subscription, for sure. I cannot get up with 3 kids and a puppy without just mounds of coffee every single day.
That's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. That's an interesting one. So, Brian, what's the best way people can get a hold of you if they have interest in learning how you can help them looking at real estate? I know you have an offer you wanted to provide to the listeners as well.
Yeah. So we work all over the country. It doesn't matter where you are. And as a subscriber to Dr. Lynn's podcast, we're offering free lease evaluation. So if you have a lease now, whether it's expiring in 1 day or 1 year, send it to us and let us take a look at it and let you know what position you're in so that you can prepare for the future. Everything starts with education. So we're providing a free lease evaluation, free lease analysis against the market. It's really easy. You can send it to 1 or 2 places. You can either send it to Brian, Brian, at Roam Commercial Realty, or easier, you can send it to info at roamcommercialrealty.com. Roam is spelled ROAM.
Got it. Well, Brian, this was really educational. I think the people that are going to listen to this are really going to appreciate your expertise in the space. It's not my expertise at all. If you like the episode, please share it with your colleagues. Anybody looking to potentially buy or lease a building to reach out to Brian as well, or listen to this podcast to learn more. You already given your information. It's Brian at roamcommercialrealty.com or info at roamcommercialrealty.com. If you like the episode, again, please share it. Please review us. Please promote us. I don't do a hell of a lot of promotion, unfortunately. I do it just by mentioning the podcast and hoping people want to listen to it. Episodes come out Fridays at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every single Friday. This is season 8 already, hard to believe. And don't forget to thank our sponsors, both Dental Intelligence and the Doc Sites, for their support. And take a look at my event, Supercharge Your Dental Practice, superchargeyourdentalpractice.com, September 26th and 27th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You can go to the website to learn more. And as I end every single episode, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, Brian, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you.